You believe you understand power. You believe it looks like money, like armies, like titles carved into marble. It does not. Power in its purest form looks like a closed door and a person on the other side of it who knows something you do not. 500 years ago, a family in Italy understood this before anyone gave it a name. They did not rule through the sword first. They ruled through knowing. The Borgias did not simply collect enemies and allies, they collected information, and they spent it the way other families spent gold. This is not a history lesson. This is an autopsy of a method that never died. It only changed its clothing. Somewhere in your life, right now, someone is using it on you. The Borgias were not the wealthiest family in Renaissance Italy, nor the most militarily dominant. What they possessed instead was a network, priests who heard confessions, servants who cleaned bedrooms, physicians who treated rivals, messengers who carried letters meant for other eyes. Every one of these people was a node. Every node fed information upward. Rodrigo Borgia, who became Pope Alexander VI, did not simply pray his way into the papacy. He understood, with a coldness that unsettled his contemporaries, that the man who knows the private failures of his rivals holds more leverage than the man who merely outspends them. This is the first lesson, and it is uncomfortable. Power does not require love, loyalty, or even competence. It requires access. Every relationship you have ever entered, professional, romantic, familial, operates on an invisible ledger of what each party knows about the other. This is called information asymmetry, and it is the single most underestimated force in human dynamics. The person who knows more about you than you know about them does not need to raise their voice to control the room. They simply wait. Asymmetry breeds a quiet, structural advantage that has nothing to do with charisma or intelligence. It is arithmetic. Whoever holds more variables can predict more outcomes. Whoever can predict more outcomes can position themselves before the other party even understands there was a game being played. A secret is not simply hidden information. It is a form of currency that appreciates in value the longer it remains untouched. Think of what a secret does the moment it is shared. It creates a debt. The person who receives it now owes something back: trust, reciprocity, silence of their own. The Borgias understood that secrets were rarely kept for the sake of protection. They were kept for leverage, released only when the timing served a purpose. You have likely done this yourself, perhaps without nomming it. You have held back a piece of information not because it needed protecting, but because holding it gave you a quiet, private sense of control over a moment that would otherwise have ended. Silence is not the absence of communication. It is one of the most aggressive tools available to a person who understands power. When you say nothing, you force the other person to fill the space with anxiety, with over-explanation, with confessions they did not intend to make. The Borgias were masters of strategic silence in negotiations, allowing rivals to talk themselves into revealing their true position while offering nothing in return. Silence unbalances a conversation because most people cannot tolerate it. They will hand you information simply to end the discomfort. This is not passive behavior. It is one of the most calculated forms of aggression that exists, and it leaves no fingerprints. You have been taught that listening is a virtue, an act of empathy. In the architecture of power, listening is reconnaissance. The person who listens more than they speak is not necessarily kind. they are gathering. Every unguarded sentence you offer in a casual conversation becomes raw material someone else can use later, often without your awareness that it was ever collected. The Borgia court thrived on this dynamic. Banquets, confessions, private audiences, all of them opportunities to extract, rarely to reveal. If you have ever left a conversation feeling as though you disclosed far more than the other person did, you were not imagining it. You were being mined. Information withheld creates need. This is one of the oldest mechanics of control, and it is rarely discussed because it does not look like control. It looks like patience, like discretion, like professionalism. But withholding what someone needs to know, a decision, a diagnosis, a plan, a piece of context, keeps them anchored to you. They must return, ask again, wait on your terms. The Borgias used delayed disclosure constantly in diplomacy, allowing rival states to remain uncertain of their intentions long enough that those states shaped their own strategies around fear rather than fact. Uncertainty is a leash. Whoever controls the release of information controls the tempo of everyone connected to it. Rarely does a manipulator lie outright. Lying is inefficient and carries risk of exposure. The more refined method is selective disclosure, telling the truth, but only the fragment of it that serves the desired outcome. This is more dangerous than a lie because it cannot be easily disproven. Everything stated is technically accurate. The Borgias were adept at this in their alliances, offering partial truths about troop movements, marriages, or debts that led allies to draw conclusions favorable to Borgia interests, without a single false word being spoken. You have likely encountered this in your own life. A version of events that was accurate in every detail except the ones that would have changed how you felt about it. A rumor is information without accountability. It travels faster than fact because it requires no proof, only plausibility. The Borgias, like many powerful families of their era, understood that a well-placed rumor could accomplish what an army could not, the quiet erosion of a rival's credibility before a single confrontation occurred. Rumor is currency because it can be spent without ever being traced back to its source. In modern terms, this is the whispered comment in an office, the vague insinuation at a dinner table, the sentence that begins with, "I'm not saying it's true, but..." Whoever originates the rumor rarely appears in its final form. That is precisely the design. In every functioning hierarchy, there exists a person whose value lies not in what they produce, but in what they know and who they know it about. This is the information broker, the assistant who overhears everything, the confidant trusted by both sides of a conflict, the relative who is invited to every gathering because they are useful, not because they are loved. The Borgia court was filled with such figures, cardinals who fed information both to Rome and to rival courts, servants who sold access to private rooms. The broker survives by remaining indispensable to multiple parties simultaneously, and their power depends entirely on never fully aligning with any one of them. Power belongs to whoever tells the story first. The Borgias understood that once an accusation, an explanation, or a version of events reached the public consciousness, it became extraordinarily difficult to dislodge, regardless of whether it was accurate. Cesare Borgia's reputation for ruthlessness was, in part, a narrative he cultivated deliberately, because fear that arrives before you saves you the labor of enforcing it in person. The first account of any event becomes the reference point against which every later correction is measured, and corrections rarely travel as far as the original claim. If you learn nothing else from this method, understand this: being right after the fact is far less useful than being first. The deepest form of leverage is invisible. It is not the information itself, but the fact that the other party does not know you possess it. A person who is aware you hold damaging information about them will adjust their behavior defensively. A person who has no idea you know will continue behaving exactly as they always have, handing you a continuous stream of further material. The Borgias frequently allowed rivals to believe their schemes were undetected long after they had been fully mapped, because exposure too early forfeits the advantage. Silence about what you know is often more powerful than the knowledge itself. The moment you reveal what you know, you spend the currency. Until then, it only accrues. You do not need spies in the traditional sense to build a network of surveillance. You need relationships that appear ordinary but function as information channels. The Borgias cultivated friendships, marriages, and religious appointments not purely for affection or faith, but because each relationship functioned as a listening post into another household, another court, another rival's private affairs. Every friendship you maintain, whether you intend it or not, gives someone access to details about your habits, your finances, your relationships, your fears. The uncomfortable truth is that intimacy and intelligence gathering are not opposites. In the hands of a person who understands the Borgia method, they are the same activity wearing different names. What made the Borgia family formidable was not a single act of espionage, but a structure, a web of informants embedded across courts, monasteries, and merchant houses that fed a constant stream of updates back to the family. No single piece of information mattered as much as the aggregate. This is the principle behind modern intelligence operations, corporate competitive analysis, and, on a smaller scale, the person in your life who seems to always know what is happening before anyone tells them. They are not psychic. They have built, consciously or not, a network of small sources that together produce a picture larger than any one person could see alone. You have been conditioned to view trust as a positive force, a foundation for connection. In the mechanics of power, trust is an opening. The moment you trust someone, you lower the defenses around your private information, your doubts, your plans, your weaknesses. The Borgias exploited this constantly, cultivating trust deliberately in order to create the conditions under which people would disclose what they otherwise would have guarded. This does not mean trust should never be extended. It means trust should be understood for what it actually is: a transfer of informational risk, not an emotional guarantee. Every time you trust someone with a secret, you are betting that their self-interest will not eventually diverge from your own. There is a specific, learnable skill in making another person feel closer to you than the relationship actually warrants. This manufactured intimacy, attentive listening, mirrored vulnerability, calculated warmth, lowers a target's guard far faster than overt questioning ever could. The Borgias were famous for their hospitality, their banquets, their performance of warmth toward guests who would later find themselves outmaneuvered. Intimacy built quickly and with unusual intensity should be treated with suspicion, not comfort. The speed of closeness is often inversely related to its sincerity. Genuine trust is built slowly, through repeated tests over time. Manufactured trust is built quickly, through performance, because performance is faster to produce than genuine reliability. There is a psychological phenomenon in which people, once they feel emotionally safe, begin disclosing information at a rate wildly disproportionate to the actual safety of the situation. This is the confessional effect, and it explains why priests, therapists, bartenders, and hairdressers accumulate more private knowledge about a population than almost anyone else in society. The Borgia family's deep entrenchment in the church was not incidental. Confession was, functionally, a surveillance apparatus long before the word existed. When you feel safe, your guard drops in proportion to that feeling, regardless of whether the safety is real or performed. This is precisely why manufactured safety is such an efficient tool for those who understand how to build it. Flattery is often dismissed as shallow, but it is one of the most reliable tools for lowering a target's cognitive defenses. When a person feels admired, their critical faculties soften. They become less suspicious of the intentions behind a conversation and more willing to reveal details they would otherwise protect. The Borgias were skilled practitioners of court flattery, understanding that a well-timed compliment could open access to information that direct interrogation never would. The uncomfortable truth about flattery is that it works even on people who consciously recognize it as flattery. Awareness of the tactic does not fully neutralize its effect, because the emotional response it triggers operates faster than rational evaluation. One of the most sophisticated techniques for extracting information is to offer a piece of your own vulnerability first. When you appear to disclose something personal or damaging about yourself, the other party experiences a pull toward reciprocity, a subconscious debt that compels them to match your disclosure with one of their own. This technique, used deliberately, is called strategic vulnerability, and it has been documented in interrogation rooms, sales negotiations, and courtly diplomacy alike. The vulnerability offered is often only partially true or entirely constructed, but the emotional mechanism it triggers in the listener is real. This is why the most effective manipulators do not appear cold. They appear deliberately to bleed first. Information is not only spoken, it leaks constantly through posture, hesitation, eye movement, the length of a pause before an answer. A person trained to read these signals gathers intelligence even from someone who says nothing at all. The Borgia court, steeped in the paranoid intensity of Renaissance politics, cultivated an acute sensitivity to these behavioral leaks, because a single hesitation before answering a question about loyalty could be the only warning of betrayal available. You leak information constantly without realizing it in the speed of your replies, in what you avoid discussing, in the subjects that visibly tighten your shoulders. To someone paying close enough attention, your silence is as loud as your speech. Spoken information can be denied. Written information cannot. The Borgias, like every dynasty that survived on political maneuvering, understood the permanence of the written record, letters, ledgers, contracts, and used documentation both as protection and as a weapon against those who assumed their words would evaporate. A letter kept, a message screenshotted, a conversation recorded, these transform fleeting disclosure into permanent liability. This is why the powerful are often deliberately vague in writing and unusually candid in person, where deniability remains intact. Anything committed to a durable format is no longer merely information. It becomes evidence, and evidence has a shelf life that outlasts the relationship in which it was created. Blackmail is the most direct monetization of information as currency, and its psychological mechanics are simpler than most people assume. It does not require the leverage to be catastrophic, only that the cost of exposure exceeds the cost of compliance in the target's mind. The Borgias were rumored to have used compromising knowledge of rivals' private affairs, debts, and infidelities, not always to destroy them, but to bind them into ongoing obedience, a far more efficient outcome than open conflict. The threat of exposure is frequently more powerful than the exposure itself, because it keeps the target in a permanent state of controlled anxiety, performing compliance indefinitely rather than facing a single, finite consequence. No single person in the Borgia network held the full picture. Information was deliberately fragmented, one informant handling ecclesiastical matters, another handling military intelligence, another handling family affairs, so that no single defector could expose the entire operation. This is compartmentalization, and it remains the backbone of intelligence agencies, criminal organizations, and on a smaller scale, any household or workplace run by someone who prefers control over transparency. If you have ever noticed that different people around a controlling figure seem to know entirely different, sometimes contradictory versions of events, you are witnessing compartmentalization in action. It is not disorganization. It is a deliberate architecture designed to prevent any one person from ever holding enough pieces to see the whole. Access is its own form of currency, and the person who controls access to a powerful figure often wields more day-to-day influence than the figure themselves. In Renaissance courts, the secretary who decided which letters reached the Pope's desk held power disproportionate to their formal title. The gatekeeper decides what information travels upward and what dies in transit, shaping decisions before the decision-maker is even aware a choice existed. You have encountered this figure in modern form, the assistant who filters your emails to a supervisor, the friend who decides what gossip reaches the group. Gatekeeping is rarely dramatic. It is quiet, procedural, and almost entirely invisible to the person whose access it controls. Not all information retains its value indefinitely. A secret has a half-life, a point at which its power to shock, damage, or leverage begins to decay as circumstances change, as people move on, as the stakes of exposure diminish. The Borgias understood timing intimately, releasing damaging information about rivals only when it would land with maximum consequence, rather than the moment it was acquired. Holding information too long risks it becoming irrelevant. Releasing it too early risks squandering its effect before the conditions are ripe. The skillful handler of information does not simply collect it. They track its decay rate and calculate the precise window in which its value peaks. The same piece of information, disclosed at two different moments, can produce two entirely different outcomes. Timing transforms fact into strategy. The Borgias frequently withheld damaging knowledge about a rival for months, waiting for a moment of maximum political vulnerability before releasing it. A wedding, a succession dispute, a fragile alliance, so that the information would not simply inform but destabilize. This is why patient manipulators rarely act on information the moment they receive it. They wait, sometimes for years, calculating the point at which disclosure will produce the greatest structural damage rather than the greatest emotional satisfaction. Patience, in this context, is not virtue. It is calculation dressed as restraint. Where true information provides leverage, false information, deployed deliberately, can be an outright weapon. The Borgias were not above spreading deliberate misinformation about their own strength, intentions, or alliances in order to manipulate the decisions of rivals who had no way to verify the claims in time. Disinformation succeeds not because it is believed with certainty, but because it introduces enough doubt to paralyze decisive action. A rival uncertain of your true position will often hesitate, and hesitation is frequently more valuable than confrontation. The modern equivalent is everywhere: the leaked detail that may or may not be true, the strategically ambiguous statement designed less to inform than to unsettle. To serve two masters requires a particular psychological architecture: the capacity to compartmentalize loyalty itself, to perform sincerity toward both parties while withholding full commitment from either. Renaissance courts were saturated with such figures, informants who fed both the Borgias and their rivals simultaneously, surviving precisely because their value lay in remaining useful to multiple sides at once. This figure exists in every modern institution: the colleague who reports upward and sideways in equal measure, the friend who carries stories between two feuding parties. Their apparent neutrality is not the absence of allegiance. It is allegiance to their own position, which depends entirely on never fully resolving into one side or the other. A loyalty test is rarely an honest inquiry. It is a controlled release of bait designed to see what a person does with information they believe to be private. The Borgias reportedly tested the loyalty of their circle by feeding slightly different versions of a plan to different individuals, then watching to see which version surfaced through rival channels, instantly identifying the source of the leak. This method remains in use in modern institutions under different names, from canary traps in corporate leak investigations to the deliberately inconsistent story: a suspicious partner tells different friends. The information itself is disposable. Its function is not to inform, but to reveal who cannot be trusted with it. There is a cost to knowing too much that is rarely discussed. The person at the center of an information network, accumulating leverage over everyone around them, gradually loses the capacity for uncomplicated relationships. Every interaction becomes tactical. Every disclosure from others is measured for its usefulness rather than received for its own sake. Historical accounts suggest the later Borgias, surrounded by informants and enemies in equal measure, existed in a state of near-permanent suspicion, unable to fully trust even those closest to them, because the same skills that gave them power also taught them how easily that power could be turned against them by someone equally skilled. Mastery of information as currency does not produce peace. It produces vigilance without end. Blood relationships in the Borgia dynasty were rarely sentimental in the way they are often portrayed. Marriages were data-sharing agreements as much as they were romantic or religious unions, each new alliance opening a channel into another family's finances, alliances, and private conflicts. Lucrezia Borgia's marriages were arranged with political intelligence in mind as much as personal circumstance, each union extending the family's reach into new courts and their private affairs. This is an uncomfortable but persistent pattern across history. The family unit, often idealized as a refuge from strategy, has frequently functioned as one of the most effective information-gathering structures available to those seeking power, simply because intimacy grants access that formal diplomacy cannot. Beyond the Borgias specifically, marriage across history has functioned as one of the oldest methods of formalizing an information exchange between two power structures. Each spouse becomes, whether consciously or not, a conduit into the private workings of another household, its debts, its ambitions, its vulnerabilities. This is not a claim that intimacy cannot be genuine. It is a recognition that genuine intimacy and informational access are not mutually exclusive, and history's most effective dynasties understood this dual function clearly, treating marriage as simultaneously an emotional and strategic instrument. To view marriage purely as romance, without acknowledging its function as a merger of information systems, is to misunderstand one of the oldest structures of power in human civilization. The Borgia family's historical association with poison, whether exaggerated by rumor or grounded in fact, illustrates a broader principle about the nature of concealed harm. Poison, like information, works invisibly, delivered quietly, its effects delayed long enough that the source becomes difficult to trace. The metaphor is precise. Damaging information released strategically operates the same way, slow, deniable, difficult to trace back to its origin, and often lethal to a reputation long after the moment of delivery has been forgotten. Whether or not every poisoning attributed to the Borgias occurred exactly as legend describes, the reputation itself became a weapon, because fear of an invisible method of harm is often as effective as the method itself. Knowledge accumulated as leverage carries a psychological weight that is rarely accounted for in advance. The person who knows the private failures, secrets, and vulnerabilities of everyone around them begins to see relationships primarily through the lens of risk management. Warmth becomes difficult to access sincerely, because every interaction is filtered through the question of what could be gained or lost. This is the quiet tragedy embedded in the Borgia method. The accumulation of informational power, pursued far enough, corrodes the very capacity for connection that made the information valuable in the first place. There is no version of this method that allows its practitioner to remain both fully informed and fully at ease among other people. There is a distinction rarely made explicit. Silence is not neutral. When you choose not to correct a false impression, not to reveal a piece of information that would change how someone perceives a situation. You are making a strategic choice, whether or not you frame it to yourself that way. The Borgias frequently allowed misinformation about their intentions to circulate uncorrected, because correcting it would have cost them an advantage the confusion provided. Every time you allow a misunderstanding to persist because it benefits you, you are participating in the same mechanism on a smaller scale. Silence is rarely passive. It is one of the most deliberate forms of information management available, precisely because it leaves no evidence of intent. You do not need a papal court to witness this method in action. It operates in modern corporate hierarchies with near-identical mechanics. Information hoarded by those who wish to remain indispensable, selective disclosure used to shape internal politics, gatekeepers deciding which updates reach leadership. The employee who is always slightly ahead of every announcement, who seems to know decisions before they are made, has typically built a small, quiet network of information sources, much like a Renaissance court informant, minus the velvet and the poison. Corporate power struggles are rarely won through competence alone. They are won by whoever controls the timing and framing of what everyone else eventually learns. The scale has changed, but the underlying mechanism has not. Where Renaissance courts relied on informants and intercepted letters, modern life produces a continuous, voluntary stream of personal information through digital platforms that quietly aggregate detail no single Borgia spy network could have gathered in a lifetime. The uncomfortable parallel is this: you now participate in your own surveillance, disclosing preferences, locations, relationships, and anxieties to systems designed to convert that information into influence over your future decisions. The Borgias needed spies to extract what people now offer freely. The method has not disappeared with the Renaissance. It has simply become more efficient, and it no longer requires your unawareness, only your habit. Across every era examined here, one pattern holds without exception. Those who accumulate lasting power rarely do so by broadcasting everything they know. They cultivate a deliberate gap between what they understand and what they reveal, because that gap is the source of their advantage. The moment a person's full knowledge becomes visible, its strategic value collapses. This is why the genuinely powerful tend to speak less than expected in moments of crisis, offer fewer explanations than anticipated, and seem, often unsettlingly, several steps ahead of a conversation others believe they are leading. They are not smarter in every domain. They have simply mastered the discipline of not spending information before its moment of maximum value has arrived. To fully adopt the Borgia method, to treat information consistently as currency rather than connection, requires a form of permanent internal distance from other people. Every disclosure evaluated for risk, every relationship assessed for its access, every silence calculated rather than natural. History does not record the Borgias as people who found peace in their mastery of this method. It records a family whose power was matched, almost precisely, by the number of enemies its own tactics generated, and whose downfall came as swiftly as its rise, once the balance of information finally shifted against them. Mastery of a weapon does not exempt its holder from the possibility of eventually standing on its other end. You now understand the mechanism, and understanding it does not make you immune to it. Somewhere today, someone withheld something from you and you did not notice. Somewhere today, you withheld something from someone else and told yourself it was discretion rather than strategy. Information has always been currency, long before markets existed to formalize the exchange, and it will remain currency long after every other form of power has changed shape. The Borgias are gone. Their method is not. It moves through every relationship you maintain, every silence you keep, every truth you choose to release only when it serves you. There is no version of human connection entirely free of this calculation. The only question that remains is whether you will continue pretending otherwise.